Hi again, this is Roger Breton. I wanted to do a quick video on Photoshop color management. So here's my Photoshop interface, my Photoshop main window. Let me open up an image. Let me see if I can find it. Where is it? It's a TIFF format, TIFF image I'm looking for. So let me go for TIFF. Okay, here's a Macbeth color chart in LEB. So watch what happens when I open this kind of image. Open it up. Did you see any kind of warnings go by? Nothing? Alright, let's just quickly visit the color settings. This is the most important area of the application as far as color management is concerned. Okay, it says profile mismatches. Ask when opening. And when it's RGB, it says preserve and embedded profile. That's how I have my color settings so far configured. Missing profile, ask when opening. So the important question over here is to notice that since this is an LAB image, Photoshop does not need further information. Photoshop does not need any kind of ICC information that would come from embedded profiles. There's no need for further information. Why? Because an LEB image is considered, satisfactorily or self-sufficient in terms of color information. Each, let's see if I can go to the channels and show this to you. The three channels here are lightness channel, so it goes from 0 to 100 to from white to black, and A channel, which is the relative content of red and green, roughly speaking, and B, the relative content of the blue and yellow. Combined the three and you get LAB, not RGB, it's LAB. So if I select here and this is RGB, but this is already on LAB. Okay, now interestingly, if I go back to color settings, here whether the intent is perceptual or relative or absolute, the reading in LEB on an LEB image will not change. Let me try this. So let's see if I can select the color picker. See, the color picker shows, the color picker shows 67, 16, 18. That's the LAB value for this skin tone. This represents a skin tone. This represents blue sky. This represents foliage. Then this represents a dark, African skin tone. The rest here, I don't know what lavender stands for. There's red, green, blue, yellow, magenta, yellow, and this is a grayscale. This is a grayscale that's going from 95 to 20. You can see the L is 20, this is 35 more or less. This is 50, should be 50, this is 65, and this is 80. So this is done with Munsell colors. This is N9, N8, N6.5, and 5, and 3.5, and N2. These represent value, Munsell values. The LEB scale, the L was created after the Munsell value scale. That's important to keep in mind. It's color trivia, may serve you some purpose someday if you work with the Munsell system. Alright, so that's what happens when I open up an LEB image in Photoshop. Photoshop does not need any kind of further information if it's an LEB image. It will just open it up on screen, no warnings, nothing. You can see here LEB color, 8B PCs, 8-bit per color. Now if I open up an RGB image, let me see if I can get a recent image. This is a recent image. Now this is a recent image of the same image that I converted to ECI RGB. Why CIE RGB? We can talk about it at length. It's not necessarily my default working space, but it has some interesting properties like it's D50 base, it's not D65 base, and it's a wide gamut, and I think the gamma is around 2.2, similar to what most gammas are. It's not 1.8, it's not higher than 2 point whatever, 5 or 6. It's along the lines of what we're used to use. So over here, go back to my color settings. You can tell here if I add profile mismatch on set on ask when opening, and what to do with embedded profiles. I never want to throw them off. This is criminal, should never be there, and same with convert to working RGB. Okay, say now the fact that it opened up without any kind of warnings is because the working space RGB was ECI RGB. So ECI RGB and ECI RGB is the same over here. Photoshop says, hey, I'm in business. I don't need further information. Alright, and here the reading is indirect because you see we have a red, green, and blue channel. Composite is RGB. We get an LEB color readout, 1618 for A and B and 67 for L. But it's the file structure is completely different from this file structure. Over here, the color is encoded directly in LEB. Over here, it's encoded in RGB. Now, what is it that allows us to get at the LEB values is the presence of this ICC profile. That's all Photoshop needs to calculate device-independent color numbers. And those device-independent colors are useful for many things. First of all, to display colors on the screen using the profile monitor. So let me see over here under Edit, Color Settings, what the status is or what the story is with my monitor profile. It's always under RGB, you see, and you will see this monitor RGB. This is the same as the one that's selected by default in my little application that I show you on another video. See, the monitor profile is this. Now we don't use the monitor profile, that's not for us to use. So we cancel out of this and we want to keep the colors independent of the monitor profile. At one point we can change the interpretation of these RGB colors if we go to the assign command, assign profile, and you can see just like in my application, if I show you a different one, like it's a sRGB, if I use an sRGB sort of table or translation table to interpret the RGB pixel values, which is appear on under the RGB over here. If I use that, I get a very different interpretation. You can tell the color is very different from the original ICC profile. Sometimes it's good to experiment with different RGB profiles. It depends on the images, depends on the purpose, but an image like this that carry accurate information should not be changed in my view. So I'm going to stop now and come back to this later. But that's just a quick introduction, and I think it could raise some interesting questions for you and maybe generate some discussion. Let's see. I'm happy to help.